Chapter 20. The Tala's home was lonely with the folk gone, so Anne only came by once in a while to make her rounds to check on things, making sure nothing had been tampered with. All remained quiet. She spent most of her time at her cottage, making her lace before the fire, working on the cobweb gloves for Elizabeth. She had noticed that other lace things had started to crop up, delicate cobwebby patterns gracing the arms and headrest of her chair, new lace to some of her plainer blouses. Anne did not mind. She would find something to do with all of it, when there became too much. Anne had it in mind to make an Irish lace dress, a wedding dress. She knew she would never need it, but was certain that eventually Elizabeth or Killane or Bethany would. She and the brownie began making the little motifs of the lace thread and adding them to a basket under the table. It kept idle hands busy and happy, and would come together eventually into something truly wonderful. Wednesday she was at Courts, hoping for a glimpse of Johnny, for a chance to talk, but he was not there that she could see. She briefly saw Serafina, but after a glare from Silhouette, she simply sat there, drinking her martini, and eventually went home. Anne went on as she always did, enjoying the poets or the singers, ate her dinner, and drank her tea. Syl convinced her to try a new honey whiskey, but she did not like this one quite as much. Eventually, Anne got up to recite something she'd written in her little book. She was nervous, but there were precious few in the bar she could see, and so took courage from it, and found her way to the stage, and spoke. Your touch like frost against my skin. My cheek flares with heat. Your voice like bells upon my ear. I cannot breathe, my heart is still. In darkness I wait. You come like the breath of winter, to cool my soul from summer's fire. I cannot fathom why. Soft like snow, your hand on mine, like the stillness after a fall. White blankets and quiet and peace. Even your silence is a song to my soul. She drifted back to her seat, blushing from the applause. There was something on her table, resting delicately across her plate. It was a rose fashioned of snow. She could see the individual crystals pressed together to an icy hardness. It looked as if someone had taken the rose and stabbed someone with it, and recently, each petal's edge sharp as razors and kissed by blood. At first, she didn't know what to make of it. She sat, picked it up by the stem, and examined it. It did not speak to her, nor did she really ask it beyond wondering who had left it for her. She smelled snow and earth and rosin and smiled, knowing. She had not seen him since the kiss, but he was here nonetheless. She pondered what it could mean, what he could be telling her, but found it difficult. There were too many possibilities. She thought to wait for the blood to dry and knew immediately that it never would. Lifting it from the plate, she noticed it had left no trace on the china, did not drip though it should have. She ran a finger along one petal, and though the blood felt wet, what came away on her fingertip was her own blood, where she had cut herself on the edge. She rubbed it, feeling the cut less than a paper cut. She put the blossom to her nose to smell it. It was cold, smelled like a rose with faint fragrance, like breathing snow. She kept it with her the rest of the night, got more than a few compliments on it before she left. The mortals saw it as being cut from crystal. The only touched who saw it that night, Silhouette, merely raised his eyebrow as Anne held it as if it were the most precious of gifts. She set it on her nightstand as she slept, and dreamt of kisses. In the morning, she braided her hair up for working in the garden and looked over at the rose in the mirror, thinking how it would look. She crossed to it, picked it up by the long, icy stem, and found it more flexible than the night before. She returned to the mirror and set it against the side of the bun she had twisted her braid into. It wrapped itself around and through the plate to hold it in place. She smiled. It wasn't made to do that, but somehow it did so to please her. She ran a finger along the rounded tops of the petals, managed to do so without cutting herself. She rose and headed into the kitchen for her breakfast, humming happily to herself. She started in the lower garden, checking the state of the roses and whether they were ready for pruning, taking up the empty bowls from the pixies. There were tiny footprints everywhere, and this pleased her. Her garden would have none of the usual pests, and her winter cabbages were doing nicely. The footprints put her in mind of the yellow rose, and the fact that she had never seen footprints around it. Perhaps that was why it wasn't flourishing. The morning air was suddenly rent by a screech from up by the house. It was high-pitched and terrified, and cursing in Gaelic. An got up, running to see what was the matter, and saw the yellow rosebush struggling to wrap up and hold on to a long, white and black, dragon-like creature. She tried to pry some of the branches away, but the rose retaliated, taking a swipe at her, savagely tightening around the creature. The line of blood across the back of her hand angered her, and she held it out, calling Capine from where she rested against the back door. Why she had been there never crossed An's mind to ask. She wielded the shillelagh against the rosebush, battering it back until it recoiled, letting the dragon go. The silvery white creature limped quickly behind An's skirts, clinging to her desperately. An aimed the shillelagh at the rosebush, glaring. She noticed, however, that the yellow blossoms were singed with a great deal of red. They were beautiful and fragrant, filling the garden with their perfume. It dawned on her in an instant. "You drink blood?" she growled at it. "Why'd you not let me know somehow? No wonder the pixies won't tend you." It occurred to An then that a rosebush was a living plant and not subject to the gift she had been given. She sighed. "Fine, I'll find you something I can feed you, but you leave this poor wee beastie alone." It started to reach a vine out for her, and she waved the shillelagh at it, and it withdrew. At her ankle, the little thing hissed at the bush, breathing out a puff of ice and frost. An knelt, held out her hand to the creature, and let it limp into her grasp. "Och, you poor wee thing. Your wings ripped to shreds and scratched to pieces. If you're of a mind, I'll take you to someone I know can maybe manage some mending," she said, beginning to carry it around the side of the house towards Liberty's. The creature stretched out along the cradle of her arm, adjusting itself so that it hurt less. An used Capine to guide her from her own gate to Liberty's front door, using the knob to knock so she did not disturb what rested in her arms. After a few minutes, Liberty answered the door, obviously still in her pajamas. "What's that?" Liberty said, changing her question mid-sentence. "I don't rightly know, but I found out what the yellow rose eats," An said ruefully. "It tried to eat that?" she asked, horrified. "Aye, can you help? I can dress the scratches, but that wing—" Liberty threw the door open wider and beckoned them into the house. She closed the door and stepped in front of An. "Follow me." She led her to the back of the house into the large kitchen. "Set it on the table. I want to take a look before I start mending." An laid it gently down, watching it stretch out, taking great pains to spread and lay its wings flat so they could be examined better. The scales were tiny, a pearlescent white, with black horns and nails and minor accents. The membrane of its wings was almost opal-like, shifting colors subtly as the light moved across them. Liberty looked it over, tisking over the damage. "The body's nothing," she sighed, "but that one wing. You were smart to tuck the other up when you did," she surmised. "This is going to get a mite uncomfy," she warned, and began straightening out the larger shreds of the membrane. She used a cotton swab and water to manipulate the tinier fragments, making them stick slightly to one another until they formed a mostly cohesive whole. Throughout the procedure, the creature made no sound beyond the occasional whimper or clenching of its tiny fist. When she had it as whole as she could, Liberty exerted her magic on it, watching it knit itself back together. With a soft, damp cloth, she began wiping off the blood. There wasn't much. "Well, now I know what the long red thorns are for," An sighed. The dragonling turned its head at that, and in a very feminine voice spoke in Gaelic. "And who's the daft ninny what put a vampiric rose in your garden in the first place?" Both women gasped, then laughed. "We didn't," An said. Liberty shook her head. "It sort of appeared just before the wall went up when we were building. I wouldn't put it past Danny to have seen it, liked it, and said, 'Why not? She'll love it.'" "I didn't know it was a vampiric rose," An explained, suddenly remembering having read about them once while in service. "I've spent months trying to figure out why it wasn't thriving." "And the fact that your guardian pixies avoided it like the plague didn't clue you in?" "No, I've had other things happening to keep me from noticing." An looked a little sheepish at that, sighed, then narrowed her eyes. "If you know so much about them, why'd you go near it?" She simpered, licking one ebony talon. "Hard to tell what they are when they're dormant. Besides, I wasn't expecting to find flesh-eating plants outside of Faery, now was I?" An remembered her manners. "First of all, would you like something to refresh yourself? Something to eat or drink?" She thought about it a moment. "A drop of whiskey would do my parched throat fine. And a bite of—" She paused to sniff the air. "That strawberry something I smell if you can spare it." Liberty laughed and turned. coming right up. I'm Anne, and that's Liberty, Anne said, introducing them. Have you a name or something we can call you? The creature tipped her head, regarding Anne with a narrowed eye. I don't know whether you're giving me yous names, or if your naming practices are indeed that inane. Now that's a mite rude, Liberty quipped in English without thinking, returning with a small shot glass half full of Jamesons, and a saucer with a bit of the strawberry pie and a cocktail fork. The creature picked up the tiny fork delicately and cut off a bite, nibbled it. She nodded and gathered up another. It is what it is. You tell me your names are Ov and Freedom, and what else am I supposed to think? She responded in kind. Another moment of stunned silence and a grin. Anne rested her arms on the table as she watched the creature eat. Well, we're sorry to disappoint you, but I don't remember my name. I was called Banan Keobrin while in service, and I have just taken on Keobrin, the name. Well, I've added O'Keefe to it. And I grew up in New York, Liberty said. My mother had a twisted sense of humour. The creature thought this over, sipping the whiskey daintily, shifting back to Gaelic, which seemed more comfortable for her. Very well, then. My name is Aisling, and I'm a petty drake, in case you were wondering. Anne smiled, nodding. It would have been a rude question to ask. So I'd asking you where you served. But since you brought it up, she said, arching one eye pointedly at Anne. I served as governess for the Grafin King. The dragonling made a little face of being impressed, finishing her pie. So, assuming you do something about that vampiric rose, can I live with you? And why would you want to live with me? Anne asked, as Liberty got the drake another piece of pie. You don't even know what kind of person I am. Oh, I have a pretty good idea what kind of person you are. One, you saved me. You've been trying to cultivate that rose by your own admission since you moved in, but you were willing to beat it to a pulp to rescue me. Two, you have a brownie in your house. A very happy one, unless I miss my guess, too. Three, ooh, she paused to ooh over the second bit of pie. Wait, I was on three. Three, you have a garden full of pixies in spite of having a vampiric rose, and I haven't tried to kill it. All because you've been trying to save it. That says a lot about you. Anne was stunned to silence. A lot, she reiterated, taking a huge bite of strawberry and munching happily. Liberty grinned. That is a hell of an endorsement on love. I never really gave it thought. I've just lived over there so long, I guess I just knew how to live with them. Never thought they really would have killed it if I hadn't been trying to. The dragon nodded. In fact, they were getting ready to deal with it when you started fertilizing it. They were waiting for it to attack you, but it didn't. That perplexed them. They're kind of interested in seeing what you do with it. And how do you know so much of this if you didn't know it was a vampiric? Liberty asked shrewdly, setting down pie and tea for Anne and herself. The dragon gave a little snort and a puff of condensation rose from her nostril. They told me after I got caught. You didn't hear all the buzzing? 'Tweren't bees, let me tell you. They were apologising. So you get along with pixies? She nodded. And some sprites. Have one or two boggart friends, but we don't usually talk about them. Well, I don't see a problem with it, but Anne began, picking at her own pie. I don't stay home much. I'm a governess, and I have a child to care for in the afternoons and evenings. And while she would be absolutely delighted with you, her mother might find your appearance somewhat shocking. Aisling gave her wings an experimental snap, flipping them open and then closed like a pair of fans. That's fixable. I can look like anything I want. To humans. They see what they expect to see. Liberty nodded. That's how it is with most of us. Humans, by and large, just don't want to see magic, so they don't. Liberty thought a moment. This, however, might solve one of your little problems. What problem might that be? Anne asked with a frown. Liberty chose her words carefully. Your need for a service animal. She turned from Anne to the dragon. You see, the shillelagh can only help her so much, keep her from running into things, but finding the day-to-day mundane is a chore. She has to feel her way around on the table to find her cup, but with you helping her, most of that's a non-issue. Aisling cocked her head the other way. But she's fine. She found me with no trouble. I have a gift that allows me to see all things magical, Anne answered, and my house itself is magic. But this teacup in my hand is only so much fog. It shows up only as a hole in my hand, a place I cannot see. I am, in all senses, outside of magical places, blind. And I've already burned myself in the Tallows kitchen because I didn't know there was a pot you could cook in off the stove. Liberty winced. Ooh, a crock pot? They're a time-saver, but a bear trap if you don't know it's there and on. So will you? She asked, turning back to the petty drake. What must I do? She asked, nibbling another bite of her pie. Just stay with her. Ride on her shoulder mostly. Warn her when she's about to hit something or someone or get hurt. Also, make sure she knows where her plate and cups are. That sort of thing. Oh, and I don't recommend flying in public. Out here at the race, no one's going to look at you and askance. But beyond, best they take you for a service monkey. Monkey? She hissed, insulted. 'Tis the most common service animal for what you'll be doing, if you accept. You don't have to, Anne added. I'll manage on as I have. Dodging traffic and hoping no one runs a red light, Liberty snapped. You think I don't know what you face coming to carts every Wednesday and Friday? Anne blushed a little. I can stop coming, she said quietly, knowing the reaction she'd get. Liberty nearly exploded. Like hell! I'll install a bouncer at that corner waiting for you if I have to. Anne laughed as Iceland squealed and swore in Gaelic. All right, I'll do it. Easy work anyways. Plus, there'll be snuggling in warm places and more pie. Right? There will be more pie. There will be more of a lot of things. The Brownie and Martha are both excellent cooks. So's Lafayette. Well, that's all right then, she simpered, curling her tail around herself as she sipped her whiskey. Liberty settled down, turned to Anne. So, you're going to be at the Christmas party at Courts, right? Well, I wasn't planning. I'd like you to come. I throw a party every year for underprivileged children, and I'd like your help. What do you need me to do? That I can. Liberty's eyes lit up. Tell stories. She smiled. Well, I know a few.